The Renaissance was not just pretty paintings. It was the spark that changed everything in Europe. Let me show you why Unit 1 is a game changer for the AP European History course and exam.
Greetings, history students. Welcome to a new season of AP History Help. We are going to alternate back and forth with AP European History this season. This week, Unit 1, a unit packed with innovation, art, exploration, and a whole lot of change. Whether you're new to AP Euro or just brushing up, this episode will give you the big themes, key events, and must-know terms that always show up on the exam. Last week, we talked about setting yourself up for success in AP History classes by starting with good habits. I am Wendy. And for those of you who have been in class with me before, you know that I am here to help you succeed in your AP History courses. If you're taking AP Push or AP World, I've already done Unit 1 for you. You will find them at the beginning of last season, episodes 23 and 24. Be sure to check those out. AP Euro has a lot to cover, so let's not waste any time and get on with this episode. Come on in, class, let's take your seats and get started. Today we're going to learn about the period covering 1450 to 1648 and hone in on the unit of study that is called Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. There is so much more than that. We also look at new styles of monarchies, the early building of colonies, which resulted in the slave trade, and a revolution in the way that business and trade was conducted. In AP History courses, context is very important. As a matter of fact, I have an entire episode talking about context way back in Season 1 on episode 12. Go check that out. But anyway, we have to take a look behind us to see what's going on before this time and place that set the stage. In Europe, we're coming out of the Middle Ages, where the Roman Catholic Church played a unifying role. But the church began to loosen its grip due to the plague wiping out almost a third of the population and the Crusades not being very successful. Partly because of the move away from the church, people began to explore other answers to life's questions. The answers would be in classical learning from Greece and Rome, and in a shift to individuals rather than God to solve problems. In addition, the Crusades showed people that there was a world outside of Europe that was ripe for discovering or exploring, and as a result, the desire for riches, as well as the potential to spread Christianity, would spark early exploration. The word Renaissance means rebirth, which is what it was, a rebirth of interest in ancient Greece and Rome, who had golden ages. Many Europeans, especially in Italy, wanted it to be like that again. Humanism, or the belief that humans are capable of achieving great things, was the absolute foundation of this movement. It's the most important word in this unit. A guy named Petrarch led the way with his ideas and became the father of humanism. Now, most people know the Renaissance for the art, but the Renaissance wasn't just about the pretty paintings. It was a cultural, intellectual, and economic rebirth starting in the Italian city-states. And this was like the 14th century, and it spread across Europe, largely fueled by wealthy patrons like the Medici family, who funded artists and thinkers challenged medieval ideas. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, they weren't just Ninja Turtles. They were Renaissance artists. And there were many others who created iconic paintings and sculptures. Machiavelli wrote about politics. Brunelleschi invented a new type of dome that would define the Florence skyline. There are so many more people and specific achievements that make it challenging not to spend a month on the Renaissance alone, which I might have actually done the first year that I taught this course. Don't fall into that trap, teachers. But here is why it matters for AP. The shift toward secularism, which is away from religion, the shift toward secularism and individualism will ripple into the Reformation and the scientific revolution, which will come a little bit later in the course. A possible essay topic would be to compare the Renaissance's focus on individual achievement with the medieval focus on religious life, a great change over time, or comparison essay. What do you think is the most significant invention in history? Seriously, think about it. Many of you might say the computer or the cell phone, or maybe something medical. A good deal of historical thinkers agree that the right answer is the printing press. In the mid-15th century, Johannes Gutenberg's printing press changed everything. Books got cheaper to make, and as a result, literacy rates climbed from 5% in Europe to 20%, and new ideas spread like wildfire. Reading is knowledge. Knowledge is power. This made it harder for authorities like the Catholic Church to control knowledge. And here's a tip. The printing press is perfect context or cause to drop into your DBQ or your LEQ because it connects to every major intellectual movement from the Reformation to the Enlightenment. Fun fact time. Did you know that Michelangelo, the artist, didn't want to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? Could you imagine wanting to turn that down? Have you seen it? If you haven't, definitely Google it. But Michelangelo considered himself first and foremost a sculptor, and he thought the job was beneath him. He actually recommended Raphael for the job. But Michelangelo was so against doing this job that he actually wrote a whole sarcastic poem about how much he hated the project. Yet, it became one of the most famous works in Western art. Sometimes history's masterpieces started as side gigs. I might argue that the age of exploration could also be used as a cause or a context. Portugal and Spain led the way with overseas exploration in the late 15th century, motivated by the 3 Gs: God, gold, and glory. They sought new trade routes to Asia and stumbled upon the Americas. Prince Henry the Navigator created a school for explorers, teaching them how to use the innovative technologies like the compass, the astrolabe, and how to drive a boat. Well, I know you steer a boat. Wait, do you operate a boat? Whichever, you know what I mean, right? It requires a little instruction, especially before there were engines and only sails. So Prince Henry, he was from Portugal. So the Portuguese really kicked things off with Da Gama and Diaz. Diaz sailed down the coast of Africa to the Cape of Good Hope, and Da Gama went the furthest, making it around Africa to India. That's how I help my students remember which one went where. Like Diaz got to the tip of Africa, and Da Gama went the furthest, so he went around and over to India. So make sure you know the impact of some of the others like Magellan and Columbus. Yes, speaking of Columbus, arguably the most impactful part of the age of exploration was the Columbian Exchange, which transformed diets, economies, and populations worldwide, but also triggered forced labor systems and the Atlantic slave trade. The Columbian Exchange had enormous consequences, the most beneficial being the increased health and population growth for Europe. Exploration and claiming land largely go right along with the rise of new monarchies. As we see the power of the church decrease, the power of the kings and queens of European nations grows. Breaking it down to the big ones, England sees top-down religious reform when Henry VIII asks the Pope for a divorce from his longtime wife and mother of his daughter. Well, she happens to be the daughter of the King and Queen of Spain. So when the Pope denies Henry VIII, Henry breaks off from the Catholic Church and starts the Church of England, naming himself the supreme head. He grants himself a divorce, marries the woman who he was having an affair with, Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn had promised to give him a son. She fails to do so. And Henry ends up eventually with 6 wives, 2 daughters, and a son. That son would succeed him, but he wasn't very healthy and he didn't live for very long. So Henry's first daughter, Mary, rained holy hellfire down on London, executing non-Catholics until her sister Elizabeth would remove her from power. And Elizabeth I, more or less, stopped persecuting people due to religion, and she ruled for 46 years, never marrying and never having children. And as a result, she would be the last of the Tudor dynasty, and her nephew of the Stuarts would become the first monarch of the Stuart dynasty. In Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella's marriage would not only deliver Henry VIII's first wife, but they would unify Spain, laying the groundwork for the modern state. They centralized power, and they were best known for the Reconquista, kicking out the last of the Muslims and the Jewish population from Spain, as well as the Inquisition, which punished anyone who wasn't Catholic and didn't leave the country. In France, the 100 Years' War ended in 1453, leaving France in a shambles, but it allowed the king to centralize power. Notice a pattern with this centralized power. The Concordat of Bologna, signed between Francis I and Pope Leo X in 1516, was an agreement with the Pope that gave the French king power over church leaders, and the Pope got to keep the money from the churches in France. Fast forward to 1598, when the Edict of Nantes is issued by Henry IV, granting rights to the Huguenots, or the Protestants, unifying France and ending its religious wars. Meanwhile, in the German territories, which Germany did not become Germany until the later 1800s, but so in the German territories, which constituted the Holy Roman Empire, there were Catholic and Protestant differences that would take some time to settle. That would finally happen with the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, which allowed the individual rulers to choose Lutheran or Roman Catholicism for their subject. In case you haven't figured it out, freedom to choose your own religion was definitely not a thing yet. And in Unit 2, we do talk about the Protestant Reformation and the breaks that start to happen with the church and the different forms of Protestantism that come out of this. So the Catholic Church lost influence as wealth and power shifted. Innovations in banking and finance created urban financial centers and a money economy. Commercial and professional groups made up of merchants and lawyers and other educated individuals gained power and allied with monarchs. Owning land was still important. But education and expertise was also crucial. Political fragmentation allowed new ideas to emerge. Theories supported the emerging secular or non-religious based state. Basically, the focus shifted to the relationship between individuals and the state's duty to care for its people. Okay, so all these changes, from the shifts in power to the colonial expansion and competition for trading networks, creates quite the rivalry on the world stage. Europe was like the sleeping giant, now awake. There was a desire for power, resources, and luxury goods, which led to more military and trade interactions. And they used coercion to establish empires, subduing the native populations and enforcing trade monopolies. In North America, the Netherlands, England, and France all claimed land and established trade. Eventually, the British would take New Amsterdam from the Dutch, and the French and English would duke it out in the 7 Years' War. The Spanish also claimed land in the south, while the Portuguese, they really lacked the power and the resources to claim much other than modern-day Brazil. Although they were told by the Pope that they could only have Brazil and lands east of that in what was called the Treaty of Tordesillas. A quick word from our sponsor. Did you know that you could buy me a cup of coffee? Those of you listening, that was me taking a sip of my coffee. I have a website called aphistoryhelp.com, and I'm always putting up cool resources there that are free. You can head on over there. There's a little pop-up that you'll see that you can enter your email address, and I promise I am not going to spam you. You will get an initial email with the acronym that I talked about last week and a resource for each of the AP History courses. But on the website itself is an opportunity to buy me a cup of coffee. Literally just like $5 to say, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing for me. I'm learning a lot, or I'm learning something, and I'm a poor student, but here's a cup of coffee. I would be ever so grateful. All right, so the Atlantic slave trade emerged due to wiping out most of the indigenous population of the Americas. The Portuguese brought the first enslaved Africans to Europe in 1441, and this grew gradually as the Portuguese explored and traded along the West African coast. But then, as Europeans established plantations in the Americas, this led to the need for a large workforce. And this was for like labor-intensive crops like rice, sugarcane, coffee, cotton. And plantation owners first used the indigenous people as slave laborers under cruel conditions. But there was a demographic catastrophe. Deaths from European diseases and harsh treatment among indigenous people caused the Europeans to turn to enslaved Africans. The middle passage of the triangular trade routes led to the largest seagoing forced migration in human history, shipping enslaved Africans to the Americas and the West Indies, and millions were transported between 1518 and the mid-19th century. It was not safe, and 13% died on the voyage across the Atlantic. It was so bad that sharks' migration patterns changed as they learned to follow the slave ships for a guaranteed meal. Last are the economic effects of this new commercial revolution. Daily life was shaped by commercial and agricultural capitalism, creating a market economy, one where the market and not the government determined production, and entrepreneurs became the powerful. Money replaced bartering. New banking tools are used, like double entry bookkeeping and the use of joint stock companies. Urban financial centers like Genoa, Amsterdam, and London grew. Agriculture started to become commercial, and with vast amounts of gold and silver from Spanish America, this created more money in circulation. So a price revolution happened. Landowners started acquiring more land and fencing it in what was called the enclosure movement. This increased productivity and decreased the overall prices of food, which in turn increased population and caused a lot of peasants to move to towns and cities. In Western Europe, they now had mobility and job choices. But in Eastern Europe, conditions got worse. Cities like London and Paris grew quickly, becoming crowded and unsanitary. See, they lacked the resources for rapid growth, which perpetuated the bad living conditions. But ultimately, it sets the stage for the Industrial Revolution. But that's a whole nother time period. Now, if you're a teacher and you're listening, I know, I'm aware, you know that I skimmed over quite a few topics. AP Euro goes more in depth than the other two AP History courses, which makes it really challenging to cover a unit in preferably 20, but never more than 30 minutes. So that is going to be it for today. Next episode will be for everyone, looking at the spice themes as a simple thematic way to approach your AP History course. And that will air on April. It's only August right now. Goodness. That will air on September 9th. I've never seen someone want to fast forward through the school year so fast. That will air on September 9th. And Unit 2 of AP Euro will return on September 23rd. In the meantime, connect with me on TikTok, Instagram, Substack, even Facebook. All you got to do is search for AP History Help. I'm at AP History Help on all of them. Head on over to my website, aphistoryhelp.com, for lots of resources and to help you be successful in the course and on the exam. And with that, this episode of the AP History Help podcast is now history.